is gathering in the valley of Jehoshaphat, a place of judgment. And again, I believe we're talking about the battle of Gog and Magog. And look at verse 9. Proclaim ye among the Gentiles, prepare for war. Right? Prepare for war. Wake up the mighty men. Let the men of the war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves, and call all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about thither, cause the mighty ones to come down, O Lord. Now the mighty ones are the angelic beings. Let the heathen be wakened, and come to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come ye, come down, for the press is full, the vats overflow, their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and the moon shall be darkened, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. So, looking at this, and I have it up on the board here, prepare, the word literally means in Hebrew is to sanctify. To sanctify a war, to set apart a war. And to wake up the mighty men, put in the sickle, the harvest is ready. Jesus is going to send the angelic beings in the time of the harvest for the harvest. What is he going to do? He's going to gather the wheat to the barn and the tares for the burning. All right? So this is the separation, that the tares and the wheats are growing up together until they're ripe. And that's what Joel's talking about, is that God is sending forth his angelic beings to take the harvest at the time, and I believe that's the rapture of the church. The barn is to the heavenly throne of God. The tares to the fire is the tribulation period. And it begins at the battle of Gog and Magog.
So the word fire is judgment.
It's judgment. Yeah, it's definitely judgment. But notice in verse 15, the sun and the moon will be dark, and the stars will draw their shining. We see that consistently. It's a darkening of these heavenly bodies. There'll be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. The powers of heaven will be shaken. That's what Luke 21 says. 21 verse 25. And so we need to understand that. What's the purpose of it? Look at there. Verse 17, so shall ye know that I am the Lord your God, dwelling in Zion, in my holy mountain. That's going to be the net result of it. All right? So we see that very significant passage there in Joel. Now we're going to look a little closer at this. Let's go back. Oh, let me go back there a little bit. Notice there, verse 14, multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. And again, the word of decision is threshing. You go to Israel. You go to the Jezreel Valley. It's a big bowl. That's what it is. And if you've ever seen a threshing of grapes, there's a bowl. They put the grapes in the bowl. That's the picture. That's the picture of the valley of Jezreel. The harvest is going to take place. And God's going to gather the armies into that valley, and they're going to assemble there, and God's going to wake them up. We're going to see some significant passages concerning that as well in Joel. So we see that preparation. Now Ezekiel 39, verse 11, it's up on the screen. I want to show you something here. You go to Ezekiel 39, and it says there, and it shall come to pass in that day that I will give unto Gog a place there of graves, where? In Israel. That's why Israel had to be born as a nation. This prophecy couldn't be fulfilled. Right? The valley of the passengers on the east of the sea. All right? And it shall stop the noses of passengers, and there shall they bury Gog and all his multitude, and they shall call the valley of Magog. And 7 months shall the house of Israel be burying of them, that they may cleanse the land. Yea, all the people of the land shall bury them, and it shall be to them a renowned the day that I shall be glorified, saith the Lord. And the passengers that pass through the land, when they see the man's bone, they shall set a sign on it, till the buriers have buried it in the valley of Magog, and also the name of the city shall be Magog. These shall cleanse the land. And the meaning of Magog is multitude. Now, what did Joel say? Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. In the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38, Magog, which literally means multitudes of God, or multitudes of Gentiles. Now, if you notice on the screen, I have a verse in Revelation chapter 20, verse number 8. Revelation 28 up there. And here's why I have it. Because the picture here is at the very beginning, God is going to gather the Gentiles, and He's going to have a sacrifice, a burnt offering, if you would, of heathen, people that don't believe and that are against Israel, and He's going to utterly destroy them. That's called the Battle of Gog and Magog. And then for 1,000 years, when the Lord returns, He's going to seal up Satan for 1,000 years. And at the end of 1,000 years, He releases him. Yeah. And He's going to gather the Gentile nations again. That's what verse 8 is about. And shall go out. This means Satan. He shall go out to deceive the nations which are on the four quarters of the earth. Gog and Magog. You see that? Who is Gog and Magog? Well, Gog is the leader, and Gog and Magog are the Gentile nations on the four corners of the earth. That's who Gog and Magog is. To gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. So we understand who Gog and Magog is. We see it in Joel. Prepare for war. Prepare the Gentiles. Prepare the heathen. Prepare the nations. They're going to come against Israel. And here at the end, God's going to use Satan again. Can you imagine after 1,000 years of the Lord living and reigning on earth that people would choose not to follow Him?
Unbelievable.
What does that show you?
The heart of man is wicked.
Depravity of man.
Yeah, you know what you're not going to be able to say? The devil made me do it.
That's right.
Because the devil's been bound for 1,000 years. That's sinful flesh. It's the remnants of the sinful flesh. It's going to be utterly wiped out. Then a new heavens, and then a new earth, and then we will enter into eternity, the new heavens and new earth, with the Lord Jesus Christ.
And this is actually the Battle of Armageddon, right?
That is not the Battle of Armageddon. That's the Battle of Gog and Magog after 1,000 years. The Battle of Armageddon takes place before that, at the end of the tribulation. We'll see that. I have that coming up. Okay, so here's just the definition out of Strong's. Haman Gog, all right, it literally means multitude of God. All right, that's what the name means. Right? So that's why I believe they're one and the same, the book of Joel. Now look at Zechariah chapter 12. Zechariah chapter 12. Okay, the burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord, stretch forth the heavens, and lay at the foundations of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. Just look at that triangle accomplishment there. All right, He stretches out the heavens, the cosmos. He lays the foundations of the earth, and He forms the spirit within man. All right, He's the creator of all. I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto the people round about. Okay, 22 Arab nations all around them. Is Israel a cup of trembling? Yes, it is. When they shall be in siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem, and in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. See, it's not just the people round about, but all over the world. It's a burdensome stone. I'll just give them the land, right? Sure. And all that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered against it. See that? Yeah, look at it. God and Israel, that's a majority.
That's for sure.
That's a majority, you know. It's like, forget it. In that day, saith the Lord, I will smite every horse with astonishment, and his rider with madness. I'll open my eyes upon the house of Judah, and I'll smite every horse of the people with blindness. And the governors of Judah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength in the Lord of hosts, their God. And that day will I make the governors of Judah like a hearth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire in a sheaf. And they shall devour all the people round about on the right hand and on the left, and Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place, even in Jerusalem. And again, I believe this is pointing to that battle of Gog and Magog, when the armies of the world will come and they will be devoured. And Israel is going to be like a match that'll set things on fire. And God's going to light the match. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 1. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and women ravished, and half the city shall go forth in captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. I believe that would make reference there to 144,000. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations. as when he fought in the day of the battle, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof towards the east and towards the west. And there shall be a very great valley, and half the mountain shall be removed towards the north part, and half of it towards the south. Now, one of the things that just hit me, this is what I love about Bible prophecy. Every time you study, you see something that you didn't see before. And I was watching the video that you gave me, Carolee, on the prophecies of Israel. And there's one section in the prophecy, they talk about Solomon the Magnificent, and how there was a rumor going for it that Messiah was going to return. If Messiah would return to the east gate. And so they sealed up the east gate so Messiah couldn't return. And they put Arab graves in front of it, because you don't want to desecrate. Nobody will desecrate the graves. Nobody, so they're trying to prevent Messiah coming. Well, guess what this earthquake is about?
Open the graves.
From east to west, right? It's going to divide. Get those graves go, get them out of the way, and that's what's going to happen. And his feet's going to come down the Mount of Olives, and he's going to walk right across the east gate.
That's right.
So it's like, it's just crazy, but you look at this prophecy, and you think, that's what that's all about. The Messiah is going to return.
But also makes you think that people do believe the Messiah is going to return, and they don't. Like Islam doesn't want to
Yeah.
Or why would they go to all that trouble to seal
Exactly.
these gates and put up these barriers?
Yeah.
That's right.
Do everything opposite they can so that this can't come true.
Yep. Look at this verse in Revelation 14. And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters, as the voice of a great thunder. I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. So when the Lord Jesus Christ, he's going to step foot on Mount Zion. He's going to first land on the Mount of Olives. It tells us in this passage. Look at this. Okay, so we've been looking at this prophetic overview now. We see the Battle of Gog and Magog, the opening of the sixth seal, the rapture of the church, all those taking place at the same time. Now, the conclusions are this. Number one, the next event on the prophetic calendar, this is on your sheets, I believe. Yeah, it is, on page 19. The next event on the prophetic calendar is the gathering of the Gentile nations of the world against Israel. Number two is, this will result in fulfillment of Ezekiel 38 and 39, the battle of Gog and Magog being utterly destroyed. Number three, this will mark the beginning of the end of Gentile rule, and when God will focus on the redemption of Israel and fulfilling his covenant promise to Abraham concerning the land of Israel. The other thing, the fourth item we need to see here is that the parallels in Joel chapter 2, verse number 20, concerning the northern army and the multitudes in Joel chapter 3, verses 9 to 14, and Ezekiel 39, along with the coming of the day of the Lord, also accompanied with signs in the heavens of Joel chapters 2 and chapters 3, and Luke 21, 25 to 26. Matthew 24, 29 and 31, Acts 2, 18 to 22, and the opening of the sixth seal of Revelation 6, 12 to 17 indicates the coming of the day of the Lord. Now, just go back to Joel chapter 3 there, and verse number 16. Joel chapter 3, verse 16, which says the following. The Lord shall also roar out of Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth shall shake, but the Lord will be the hope of his people and the strength of the children of Israel. So shall they know that I am the Lord your God, dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. Then shall Jerusalem be holy, and there shall no strangers pass through there any more. And it shall come to pass in that day that the mountains shall drop down new wine, and the hills shall flow with milk, and the rivers of Judah shall flow with waters. And a fountain shall come forth in the house of the Lord, and shall water the valley of Shittim. Egypt shall be a desolation, and Edom shall be desolate wilderness, for the violence against the children of Judah, because they have shed innocent blood in their land. But Judah shall dwell forever in Jerusalem from generation to generation, for I will cleanse their blood that I have not cleansed, for the Lord dwelleth in Zion. Now, when is all that going to take place? when the Lord returns. That's why we know that this prophecy is not fulfilled. We know because these things have yet to be done, and they're not going to happen. And by the way, when you get into the book of Revelation, what happens? New waters are flowing out from the throne of God. And we see the same thing here. So Joel is talking about the same event. And so we get these snapshots of what the sequence of things and the way it's going to lay out. And now we seem to understand that the Battle of Gog and the Rapture and that sixth seal event are one birth pang event that's going to deliver the world to the tribulation and the church to heaven. All right? And so that's what I mean in point number 4 there. As you compare all these passages, you come to that conclusion that it's all concerning the same coming day of the Lord. Number 5 there, and since the first set of signs in Joel's prophecy indicated the birth of the church, it is my belief that this final set of signs in the heavens regarding the darkening of the sun, moon, and stars in Joel's prophecy is also that event which will mark the end of the church age and is therefore the rapture of the church. Point 6 here, thus the judgment of Gog and Magog and the church, the rapture of the church, are both initiated with the opening of the sixth seal. Okay? Any questions on that? All right. And finally, what does this all mean? All right? What does it mean? It means the stage is set for all these events to take place. There isn't anything else that has. I mean, tomorrow, would you be surprised if you heard on the news, Russia goes to the UN and calls for a coalition against Israel? So,